He used that word on a Tuesday. Replaceable. He said it in front of his entire senior council, with the same casual authority he used when he signed off on border patrol schedules or approved the quarterly hunt rotations. He said it the way a man says something he has already decided is true, without flinching, without looking at her, without the slightest awareness that a word can be a weapon even when it isn't swung. The council chamber of the Ironvale pack was cold that morning. It was always cold. The estate sat high on a ridge in northern Montana, and the stone walls held winter the way old grievances do, deep and stubborn and long past the season that caused them. 11 ranked wolves sat around the obsidian table. At the head sat Alpha Caden Morrow. At the far end, across a distance that had been growing for months, sat his beatermate, Norah. His equal. His partner. His mistake, apparently. The argument had been about the Ridgeback Alliance, a treaty that Norah had spent 14 months building quietly and brilliantly, pack by pack, without a military threat or a single life lost. It was, by every measurable standard, the greatest diplomatic achievement in Ironvale's modern history. The Council knew it. The Allied packs knew it. Caden Morrow had decided, in the final hour, to override it. He had received an offer from the Ashrock Coalition, a military alliance that promised more territory through force. He wanted to take it. Norah told him it would unravel 4 years of trust in a single season. He told her that strategy was his domain and she should let it go. She did not let it go. She laid out her case, calmly, precisely, with the specific competence of a woman who had spent her entire adult life understanding the architecture of trust between packs. She cited data. She cited precedent. She cited the names of 3 pack alphas who would pull their support the moment Ironvale pivoted to aggression. The council was persuaded. Caden Morrow was not. And so he looked at the woman who had built his greatest triumph, the woman who carried his bond and his rank and his future, and he said the word that would cost him everything he never knew he had until it was gone. Your position here is not irreplaceable, Norah. Remember that. The council went very still. Even the fire in the hearth seemed to hold its breath. Norah did not argue. She did not raise a voice. She gathered her documents with quiet, deliberate movements, pushed back her chair, stood at her full height, and looked at Caden Morrow across that obsidian table for exactly 5 seconds. Then she said, "You're right, Alpha. I'll let you find out." She walked out of the chamber. She walked down the corridor. She walked through the great front doors of the Ironvale estate and into the snow, and she did not come back. That was 5 years ago. Since then, Caden Morrow has fought 3 wars he could have avoided. Lost 2 alliances she had built by hand. Watched his pack slowly fracture without the woman who knew how to hold it together. And he has spent every single day of 5 years learning, in agonizing detail, exactly how irreplaceable she was. This is the story of what it costs a powerful man to be catastrophically wrong about the most important thing in his life. And more importantly, this is the story of what a woman builds when the most powerful person in her world tells her she doesn't matter. Pay attention to her. She's the one who wins. To understand Norah Voss, you have to understand what it meant to be a beatermate in the Ironvale pack. In most packs, the beatermate is a ceremonial title, a rank given to whoever an alpha chooses, regardless of capability, a political accessory dressed in authority. In Ironvale, under the previous alpha, Caden's father Gregor, the beatermate had been exactly that. A figure. A presence. A seat at a table where the real decisions were made by men who had been making them for decades. Norah Voss had no interest in being a figure. She was 24 when the mate bond snapped between her and Caden Morrow at a crosspack summit in Billings. She was the daughter of a mid-ranked Omega and a human schoolteacher, a combination that the old Ironvale Council had viewed with poorly disguised skepticism. She had no bloodline pedigree. She had no inherited rank. What she had was a mind that could read a room the way most wolves read scent, layered, instinctive, always 3 moves ahead. She had spent the first year of their bond proving herself to a council that did not believe she belonged. She learned the pack's financial architecture in 6 weeks. She renegotiated 2 trade agreements that had been quietly bleeding Ironvale for years. She learned the names of every wolf in the pack, not just the ranked ones, but the farmers and the medics and the cubs who hung around the estate gates, and she remembered them all, forever, which was the kind of thing that built loyalty faster than any show of dominance. By the 2nd year, the council had stopped questioning her presence. By the 3rd, 3 of the 11 were coming to her with problems before they went to Caden. Caden had noticed. He had said, more than once, that she was the best strategic mind in the pack. He had meant it as a compliment. He had not yet understood that genuine respect and the instinct to override her were not compatible positions, and that one of them would eventually have to give. The Ridgeback Alliance was her masterwork. 14 months of quiet work, flying under the radar of the larger supernatural political world, building a network of small and mid-sized packs on shared values rather than shared fear. It was not glamorous. It required enormous patience and the willingness to hear no many times before hearing yes. It was everything Caden's style of leadership was not. It was also exactly what Ironvale needed to survive the next decade. When Caden said replaceable, he wasn't just dismissing her opinion on the alliance. He was telling her, in front of the 11 people whose respect she had earned through years of precise, devoted, unglamorous work, that her judgment, her history, and her presence in his pack were conditional. Contingent on his comfort. Subject to revision. Norah Voss heard all of that in one word. She had always been good at reading rooms. And so she left. Not in anger, or not only in anger. She left because she understood that staying would teach him nothing. That the only way a man like Caden Morrow would ever understand the weight of what he had said was to live, in real time, with its consequences. What follows is 5 years of consequences. 5 years of a pack learning what it means to lose the person who held it together. 5 years of a woman discovering that being told you're replaceable is either the end of your story or the beginning of a much better one. Norah Voss chose the better one. The morning after Norah left, Caden Morrow woke up at 5 a.m. to the specific silence that follows a decision that cannot be undone. He lay in the dark for a full minute before he reached across the bed and found it empty. The sheets on her side were cold. She had not come back in the night. He had half expected her to. Norah was not a woman who ran from conflict, and in the 3 years of their bond, the disagreements had always ended the same way: fierce, honest, and resolved. He had assumed this would be the same. He got up. He checked her study. Her desk was cleared, not packed, not ransacked, just carefully, deliberately empty, the way a workspace looks when someone has decided they no longer need it. Her sketchbooks were gone. The framed photo of her mother that had sat on the corner of the desk since the day she moved in was gone. He checked with the gate watch. She had driven out at 2:15 in the morning in her own car. She had nodded at the guard. She had said good night. He stood in the empty study and told himself she would be back by evening. She was not back by evening. He convened an emergency council session at noon, partly to address the Ashrock decision and partly, though he would not have admitted this, because the council chamber felt less hollow with people in it. The 11 ranked wolves arrived with the specific careful expressions of people who had witnessed something and were waiting to see how it would be characterized. Caden addressed the alliance question first. He announced that Ironvale would proceed with the Ashrock Coalition Agreement. There was no dissent. The council had learned, overnight, that dissent carried a price that none of them were willing to pay. And Beatermate Voss? Asked Elder Danny, the oldest woman on the council, in the tone of someone asking a factual question while meaning something else entirely. She's taking personal time, Caden said. For how long? As long as she needs. Elder Danny looked at him for a moment, then wrote something in her ledger and said nothing further. By the end of the week, it became clear that Norah had not simply taken personal time. She had not visited her friends in the pack, had not checked in with the medic she supervised, had not responded to the 3 messages Caden had sent through official channels. She had, with the same quiet efficiency she applied to everything, simply removed herself. On day 8, Caden drove to the address of Norah's closest friend outside the pack, a human woman named Dee who lived in Missoula and knew the supernatural world existed and treated that knowledge with the pragmatic discretion of someone who had been doing so for 20 years. Dee opened the door, looked at Caden for a long moment, and said, "She's not here." "I need to talk to her, Dee." "I know you do. Can you tell me where she is?" Dee leaned against the doorframe. She had a mug of coffee in one hand and the expression of a woman who had already decided something. "She told me what he said," Dee said. "Replaceable. In front of 11 people who used to think the sun rose on her judgment." She took a sip of coffee. "I've known Norah for 12 years. You want to know what she said when she got here that night?" Caden said nothing. "She said thank you. She said it out loud in my kitchen at 3 in the morning. Said it was the most clarifying thing anyone had ever told her." Dee stepped back and began to close the door. "She doesn't want to be found, Alpha Morrow. And frankly, I think you should spend some time figuring out why before you keep looking." The door closed. Caden stood on the porch in the January cold, and for the first time felt the specific, heavy quality of a silence he had made himself. Norah Voss arrived in Glacier Falls, a small supernatural neutral town tucked into the mountains 3 hours from the Ironvale border, with 2 duffel bags, a laptop, a phone with 47 unread messages from Caden that she would not read for 3 weeks, and the clearest head she'd had in 3 years. She rented a room above a bookshop from a retired Omega named Silas, who asked nothing and charged fair money and made excellent coffee. She sat at the window that first morning and watched the mountain light hit the snow and thought, with a precision that surprised her, I am starting now. She spent the first 2 weeks sleeping. Not from depression, from the bone-deep exhaustion of a woman who had been running at full capacity for 3 years without a single day that was entirely her own. She slept and she ate and she walked in the cold air along the river trail every morning. And she let herself be ordinary for the first time since the bond had snapped her life into a different shape. On day 15, she opened her laptop and started working. She had been sitting on an idea for over a year, something she had never had the bandwidth to pursue while managing the entirety of Ironvale's diplomatic infrastructure. A consultancy. Not for any single pack, not affiliated with any alpha or territory, but a fully neutral advisory service for packs navigating diplomatic transitions, alliance building, and internal restructuring. There was nothing like it in the American supernatural market. Packs either handled these things internally, often badly, or relied on the Council of Elders, who were slow and bureaucratic and deeply invested in preserving the status quo. Norah had spent 4 years watching packs fail at exactly the things she was good at. She had watched alliances collapse over miscommunication that she could have resolved in a single meeting. She had watched packs hemorrhage resources on conflicts that better preliminary diplomacy would have prevented entirely. She registered Voss Strategic as a limited liability corporation in Montana on a Thursday afternoon, using the money she had saved from 3 years of a beta-mate stipend that she had never spent because she had never had time to spend it. Her first client came through a referral from the Ridgeback Alliance, one of the packs she had spent 14 months cultivating, who had heard she was available and called within the week. The second came from a Coven elder she had met at a summit 2 years prior. The third came from the Iron Creek pack, who were in the middle of a catastrophic internal succession dispute and needed someone to walk them back from the edge. Within 6 months, she had 7 retainer clients. Within a year, she had a waiting list. She hired 2 staff, a human paralegal named Marcus and a half-blood wolf named Tessa who had a gift for reading tension in rooms that Norah recognized as rare and worth paying for. She moved out of Silas's bookshop room and into a proper office suite. She stopped checking Caden's messages. She did not stop feeling the ghost of the bond. It was there every morning, a dull and stubborn ache in the center of her chest, like a badly healed injury that twinges in cold weather. She did not call it grief. She did not call it longing. She called it data, and she filed it away, and she worked. The supernatural world, which is small and observant and deeply interested in anyone who defies an alpha's authority and survives it, began to pay attention to Norah Voss. And back in northern Montana, inside the cold stone walls of the Ironvale estate, things were beginning to fall apart. The Ash Rock Coalition fell apart in 8 months. Norah had predicted, with surgical accuracy, the exact sequence by which it would happen. She had documented it in a memo that she had submitted to the council the morning before she left, a 3-page analysis of why the Ash Rock Agreement was structurally unsound, why the coalition's alpha had a history of defaulting on military commitments at critical moments, and why the territory it promised was not worth the diplomatic cost of abandoning the Ridgeback Alliance to pursue it. The memo had been filed. The decision had been made anyway. The first sign of trouble came 4 months in, when Ash Rock failed to provide the promised military support during a border incursion by the Stoneback Wolves to Ironvale's east. Caden had committed his own forces based on the expectation of Ash Rock reinforcements that never arrived. The border held, but barely, at a cost of 3 wounded wolves and 6 weeks of strained resources. The second sign came 2 months later, when it emerged that Ash Rock's alpha had simultaneously offered the same territorial agreement to 2 other packs, hedging his bets with the cheerful cynicism of a man who understood that most alphas were too proud to admit they'd been outmaneuvered. Caden dissolved the Ash Rock Agreement at the 8-month mark. It cost him the goodwill of the 3 packs who had witnessed his pivot away from Ridgeback, and it cost him the respect of the eastern border communities who had been promised that the new military alliance would strengthen their protection. Elder Danny placed a printed copy of Norah's 8-month-old memo on Caden's desk without comment. Caden read it in his office alone. Every word of it landed with the precision of something that had been true for a long time. "Find her," he told his beater Garrett that evening. "She's in Glacier Falls," Garrett said. She's incorporated a consultancy. She has 6 or 7 clients already. He stopped. What? She's doing well, Caden. She seems good. Something moved across Caden's face that Garrett could not entirely read. Set up a meeting. I want to talk to her. She declined the last 4 meeting requests. Send another one. Garrett sent another one. Norah's response came back within the hour, through her assistant Marcus, professional and brief. Beatamate Voss appreciates the request and is currently at capacity. She wishes the Ironvale pack well. Caden read the message twice. He noticed she had not used the title Beatamate to sign it. She had signed it Norah Voss, founder, Voss Strategic. He noticed she had not corrected Marcus for using the old title in the request. He noticed he was analyzing her message for subtext like a man trying to reconstruct a language from fragments, and that this was pathetic, and that he was going to do it anyway. The Second War came 3 months later. The border dispute with the Ridgeback packs that Norah had spent 14 months preventing became inevitable the moment Ironvale had abandoned the alliance. Without the diplomatic framework she had built, there was no mechanism for resolving the grievance. Without the personal relationships she had cultivated, there was no goodwill to draw on. The conflict lasted 6 weeks, cost Ironvale 2 more border wolves and a significant stretch of eastern grazing territory, and ended in a negotiated settlement that gave the Ridgeback packs nearly everything they had originally wanted. Everything, Garrett noted quietly, that the alliance would have given them peacefully. Caden did not respond to this. He was staring at a map of the eastern border, watching the territory lines shift in the wrong direction, and understanding for the first time that the word he had said on a Tuesday was going to keep costing him in ways he had not begun to count. It was not the wars that broke the pack's confidence in Caden Morrow. Wars, in the supernatural world, were survivable. Packs were built for conflict. What broke confidence was subtler, slower, and far more damaging. It was the absence of the 10,000 small things Norah had done. The pack's internal medic program, which Norah had designed and administered, began to falter within 3 months of her leaving. The quarterly health checks for the pack's elderly wolves stopped happening. The system she had built for tracking injuries during training sessions was abandoned because no one understood it well enough to maintain it, and asking felt like admitting something no one wanted to admit. The pack's community fund, a quiet financial safety net she had established for low-ranked families during hardship periods, ran dry in month 5 because the contribution structure she had set up required her specific oversight to function. 3 families who had relied on it quietly fell behind on their estate dues. 2 of their children stopped attending pack school. The diplomatic correspondence that Norah had managed, the steady, patient stream of letters and calls and relationship maintenance that kept Ironvale connected to the wider supernatural community, went unanswered for weeks at a time. 3 packs that had been cautious friends of Ironvale began routing their communications elsewhere. 2 councils stopped inviting Ironvale representatives to joint sessions. Caden addressed each crisis individually as it arose, throwing resources and authority at problems that Norah had been preventing through structure and relationship. He was effective in emergencies. He was less effective at understanding that the emergencies were happening because the infrastructure that prevented them was gone. Elder Danny requested a private meeting in month 9. She arrived with a folder and the expression of a woman who had decided that kindness and honesty were, in this instance, the same thing. The pack is tired, she said. Not of conflict. We are built for conflict. We are tired of entropy. Of things that should work, not working. Of gaps appearing in places we didn't know had gaps. I'm aware of the issues, Caden said. I'm addressing them. You're addressing the symptoms, Danny said. The cause is that Norah built Ironvale's domestic architecture for 3 years and then took the blueprint with her when she left. Not out of malice. She built it to run on her. It ran on her because it was hers, and she gave it to this pack entirely, and we let a word dismiss all of that in a Tuesday morning meeting. Caden was quiet. The young wolves are asking about her, Danny continued. The ones who came up in the last 3 years. She knew their names. She came to their training ceremonies. She found Kira Henst's scholarship through a program she researched herself because she remembered Kira mentioned wanting to study at the Portland Art Academy in a passing conversation 6 months prior. Danny folded her hands on the table. You know what that kind of attention does to a person? It makes them feel like they exist inside their pack. Not just as a wolf number on a roster, but as a person. Norah did that. For everyone. The silence in the room was long. What are you asking me to do, Elder? I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm telling you what's true. What you do with it is yours to decide. She stood, gathering her folder. She has a wait list now, by the way. I checked. 6 months minimum to bring Voss Strategic on as a consultancy. She's working with 4 packs simultaneously and building something the community is calling the first genuinely neutral diplomatic infrastructure for American packs in a generation. Danny paused at the door. Replaceable. That was the word, wasn't it? She left. Caden sat alone in the council chamber for an hour, staring at the obsidian table, understanding, fully, finally, at a depth that had no strategic workaround, that he had made the worst mistake of his life. Year 2 of Norah's new life looked almost nothing like Year 1, and Year 3 looked nothing like Year 2, and this was something she found quietly, ferociously joyful. She had never had the experience, in adulthood, of watching herself change on her own terms. The bond with Caden had been immediate and total. She had stepped from one life directly into another, defined immediately by his world, his pack, his needs, and structures and the specific shape of the gap she had been expected to fill. She had filled it well. She did not regret having done so. But she had never had the chance to ask what shape she took when no one else was deciding it for her. She found out. She found out that she liked mornings better than she had ever admitted. The specific quality of light before 7, the ritual of coffee and an hour of reading before the day demanded anything. She had not had an uninterrupted morning in 3 years at Ironvale. Now she protected them the way a wolf protects territory. Clearly, consistently, without apology. She found out that she was a better listener than she had known, because she was now listening for herself rather than for the pack's benefit. Her clients noticed it. They describe her, in the testimonials that began circulating in the supernatural community, as someone who heard not just what you said but what you were trying to say and what you were afraid to say, all at once. She found out that she had opinions about things that had nothing to do with pack politics or diplomatic strategy. Strong opinions, which she expressed now without the careful self-editing she had practiced for 3 years in Ironvale's council chamber. She had opinions about architecture, about music, about the specific injustice of how supernatural history was recorded and who got left out of it. She started a column in a neutral ground online publication, writing about pack diplomacy in plain language, and it developed a following that surprised her. Tessa, her staff wolf, told her once, "You're different from the person they describe at Ironvale." How so? They talk about you like you were very capable and very serious. You are those things. But you're also, Tessa searched for the word, fun. They don't mention the fun. Norah thought about this for a moment. I don't think I was fun there, she said. I think I was useful there. It's not the same thing. The ghost of the bond was still present. It had not faded the way she had hoped it might, had not dissolved into background noise. Some mornings it was barely there. Some mornings, usually in February for reasons she did not examine too closely, it ached with a persistence that required real effort to set aside. She did not call it love. She did not call it grief. She called it a cost, and she accepted it as what it was, the price of having chosen herself over a circumstance that was slowly crushing the best parts of her, and she paid it every morning and went to work. She knew Caden was looking for her. She knew, through the network of information that moved through the supernatural world like groundwater, that Ironvale was struggling. She knew about the failed Ashrock agreement. She knew about the border conflicts. She knew about the pack's internal difficulties. She felt none of the satisfaction she had expected to feel. What she felt, when she was honest with herself, was sorrow. Not for Caden, or not only for Caden, but for the pack wolves who had nothing to do with what had happened in that council chamber and were living with the consequences anyway. For Elder Danny, who had always been fair. For the cubs who had been born into an Ironvale that was becoming a harder, colder place. She filed it all away. She worked. She waited, though she could not have said what she was waiting for. Something, she thought. Something that would make it make sense. The Third War was not, technically, a war. The Council of Elders would later classify it as a territorial arbitration dispute escalated to physical conflict, which was the supernatural legal system's way of saying that Caden Morrow had made yet another political miscalculation and this one had nearly killed his pack. It began with a succession crisis in the Greyhaven pack, which sat on Ironvale's northern border. The Greyhaven Alpha died without a clear successor, leaving 3 claimants, a fragmented council, and a stretch of territory that bordered Ironvale, 2 other packs, and a wolf-neutral human city that had no idea any of this was happening 20 miles from its suburbs. It was, from a diplomatic standpoint, Exactly the kind of crisis that Norah had trained for. Managing succession disputes was a specialty of Voss Strategic. She had written the most widely cited framework for neutral mediation in supernatural succession conflicts in the previous year's roundtable proceedings. Caden did not call Voss Strategic. He chose the military option. He threw his support behind the Greyhaven claimant most favorable to Ironvale's border interests, publicly and early, before the other claimants had been evaluated. This offended both the other claimants and the two neighbouring packs who had been carefully maintaining neutrality. It offended the Greyhaven Council, who viewed it as outside interference. It offended the Council of Elders, who had specifically requested that all parties allow neutral mediation before taking sides. Within 3 weeks, what should have been a manageable succession transition had become a 4-party conflict with Ironvale isolated on the wrong side of everyone's anger. Garrett came to Caden on day 22 of the conflict with a specific expression on his face that Caden had never seen before. Not frustration, not concern, but something quieter and more final. Voss Strategic is handling the mediation, Garrett said. The Council of Elders hired them this morning. Norah is flying in tomorrow. The room went very still. She's coming here. To Greyhaven, which is 20 miles from our northern border. Caden stood up and walked to the window. Outside, the Montana winter was featureless and pale, the sky the color of old bone. What's her timeline? She has a 3-week engagement. She'll have the succession resolved in 2, knowing her. Garrett paused. Caden. The 3 claimants have already agreed to her framework. Both neighboring packs have agreed. Everyone involved in this dispute has agreed to sit down with Norah Voss Accept us. Accept us. Another silence. Tell Elder Danny that Ironvale will participate in the mediation process, Caden said. And if Norah requests a private meeting with you as part of the process. Caden turned from the window. Something in his face had changed, not softened exactly, but resolved, the way a landscape resolves when a fog finally lifts and you can see the terrain you've been moving through. Then I'll be there, he said. The mediation suite at the Greyhaven Neutral Lodge was designed to put no one at an advantage. Round table. Neutral colors. No head of the room. Norah had specified all of this in her setup requirements. And the Greyhaven staff had followed them with the attentiveness of people who understood that the woman in charge of this process had resolved 4 succession disputes and 2 territorial conflicts in the last 18 months without a single outcome going to arbitration. She was reviewing documents at the table when he arrived. She had known he would be the Ironvale representative. She had prepared for it with the specific thoroughness she applied to everything. She had reviewed the conflict chronology, identified Ironvale's strongest and weakest positions, prepared 3 resolution pathways that would give the pack a functional outcome without requiring Caden to concede more than he could politically afford. She had prepared to be professional. She was professional. What she had not prepared for, not entirely, was the physical reality of him after 2 years. He looked like he had aged 5 years in 2. The careful composure she remembered, the alpha stillness, the precise management of every expression, was present but thinner, like paint applied over something the paint was no longer quite covering. He was still large, still exact in his movements, still the kind of man a room reorganizes itself around. But there were circles under his eyes and a set to his jaw that looked less like authority and more like a man holding himself together through sustained effort. He sat down across from her. She looked at him for exactly as long as she would look at any client, then looked at her documents. "Thank you for agreeing to participate in mediation," she said, in the even, warm tone that she used with all parties. "I've reviewed Ironvale's position extensively. I want to begin by clarifying that this process is..." "Norah." She stopped. "I know the process," he said. His voice was quiet. "I know the rules of this room. I'll follow all of them. But I need 10 seconds before we begin, and I'm asking you to give them to me." She placed her pen down. She waited. "I was wrong," he said. "Not about the Ashrock decision or the Ridgeback Alliance or any specific strategic call, though I was wrong about all of those too. I was wrong to say what I said to you in the council chamber. I was wrong to say it in front of 11 people. I was wrong to prioritize my discomfort with being challenged over the reality of what you had built and what you were building." He held her gaze. "I am not asking you to come back. I'm not asking for anything in this room except the work. But I needed to say that to you directly, without intermediaries or messages, because you deserve to hear it from me." The mediation room was very quiet. Norah looked at Caden Morrow for a long moment. She looked at the man she had loved and the man who had failed her and the man sitting in front of her who appeared, for the first time in the 3 years she had known him, to not be managing the room at all. "Noted," she said. She picked up her pen. "Now, let's talk about the northern border." The mediation lasted 11 days. Norah resolved the Greyhaven succession in 9, one day ahead of her own estimate, producing an outcome that all 3 claimants accepted and both neighbouring packs endorsed. The Council of Elders issued a formal commendation, which was rare enough to make news in the supernatural community. Ironvale came out of the process with a functional northern border agreement and 2 new potential alliance contacts from the neighbouring packs who had found, through the mediation process, that Ironvale under pressure was a more reasonable entity than Ironvale's recent track record had suggested. Norah flew back to Glacier Falls on day 12. She did not say goodbye to Caden separately. She said goodbye to all parties in the formal closing session, shook hands, and left. Caden drove back to Ironvale and told Garrett to clear his calendar for the following week. "For what?" Garrett asked. "I need to think." He spent the week thinking. Not strategizing. Not planning. Not identifying tactical approaches to the problem of Norah Voss. He spent it in the kind of uncomfortable, non-productive reflection that he had avoided for 2 years by staying in motion. He sat with the question of who he had been and who he had become and where the distance between those 2 people had opened up. He talked to Elder Danny, which was not something he had ever done voluntarily in 3 years of working with her. He asked her, straight, what she thought he had done wrong. She told him for 2 hours. He listened to all of it. He talked to Garrett, who had known him since childhood and therefore felt qualified to be honest in ways that were personally uncomfortable. He asked Garrett what he had missed. Garrett told him about 8 things he had missed, with examples. He read Norah's column. All of it, from the beginning, every piece she had published over 2 years. He read her framework papers. He read the succession mediation document that the Council of Elders had distributed. He read it not as an alpha reviewing a political resource, but as a person reading the work of someone he had told was replaceable, and understanding, piece by piece and word by word, the magnitude of what that had meant. On day 6 of his week of thinking, he drove to Glacier Falls. He had not announced himself. He had not sent a message. He had no strategic plan and no speech prepared, which was so contrary to his nature that Garrett had asked 3 times if he was feeling well before letting him leave. He parked outside the Voss strategic office, which occupied a clean, well-lit space on Glacier Falls Main Street, with a modest sign and 3 cars in the lot and the specific hum of an enterprise that was running well. He sat in his car for 20 minutes. He watched people go in and out. He watched the mountain light hit the sign. Then he went inside. The receptionist, Marcus, the human paralegal, who recognized him immediately and whose expression became carefully neutral, told him that Ms. Voss was with a client and would be available in approximately 30 minutes. He asked if he could wait. Marcus said yes. He sat in the waiting area, which had good chairs and warm light and framed maps of the Pacific Northwest on the walls, and he waited. He was still waiting when Norah's office door opened and she stepped out with a pack alpha from Idaho, wrapping up a conversation with the focused, warm attention he remembered from 3 years ago. She shook the client's hand. She said something that made him laugh. Then she turned and saw Caden. Her expression did not change. It was, if anything, the most informative non-reaction he had ever witnessed. "Alpha Morrow," she said. "I don't see an appointment." "No," he said. "I don't have one." A pause. "Come in," she said. Her office was exactly what he would have expected if he had thought about it, which he hadn't, until he was standing in it. Clean and purposeful, with large windows and a drafting table along one wall covered in maps and annotated documents. A bookshelf that held volumes on supernatural legal history, conflict resolution theory, and at least 3 titles about architecture that had nothing to do with her work. A small shelf near the window with a framed photo of Dee, her human friend, and one of a wolf pack running at dusk that he recognized as the Voss family pack crest. She sat across from him. She did not offer the warm, professional welcome she had given the Idaho client. She sat across from him with the specific quality of attention she had always given him. Direct, without performance, entirely present. "You drove 3 hours without an appointment," she said. "Yes." "Why?" He had promised himself he would not strategize. He kept the promise. "Because I needed to ask you something in person and I needed to not prepare a speech." Because every speech I prepare sounds like an alpha managing a situation, and that is specifically not what this is. Norah waited. The council has been discussing the alpha title, he said. 3 of the 11 have submitted a formal motion questioning my fitness to lead, citing the last 2 years of decisions. He paused. They're not wrong to question it. I have made decisions that were bad for the pack. I've been operating from a position of personal dysfunction for 2 years, and the pack has paid for it. Elder Danny has been keeping the domestic infrastructure functional through sheer force of will and institutional knowledge that she shouldn't have to carry alone. Why are you telling me this? Because the council's proposed solution is to invite you back. Formally. With a full restoration of rank and a contract that defines your role as genuinely co-equal to mine, not subordinate, not advisory but co-equal, with separate authority over domestic and diplomatic infrastructure and a council veto power independent of my own. Norah looked at him for a long moment. Is that the council's proposal or yours? Another promise kept. Both. But mine for different reasons. What reasons? Because I don't want to run Ironvale without you. Not because I need your skills, though I do. Not because the pack needs your infrastructure, though it does. Because I have spent 2 years understanding what I said to you in that room, and what it cost, and what I was actually saying beneath the words I used, that I was afraid you were better at this than me, and I made you smaller to manage that fear, and I want to spend the rest of my life doing the opposite of that. Whether or not that means anything to you. Whether or not you accept this offer. I want you to know that I know, clearly and completely, what I did. His voice was steady. His hands were not. And the bond? Norah asked quietly. Whatever you want it to be. If you come back as a co-leader and nothing else. I will honor that. If you never want to rebuild what we had, I will honor that. I am not offering you this position as a way back to the bond. I'm offering it because it's the right structure for the pack and because you built half of Ironvale and deserve to be recognized for it. Norah turned to look out the window at the mountain light on the street below. She stayed that way for a long time. When she turned back, her expression had shifted, not softened entirely, but opened slightly, like a door that had not been fully closed after all. I'm going to need to see the proposed contract, she said. The specific language around co-equal authority. I've been taken advantage of by vague language before. I know. I'll have Garrett send the full draft by tomorrow morning. And I need 3 weeks to think about it. No contact during those 3 weeks. No follow-up messages, no intermediaries, no showing up at my office. Understood. And Caden. He looked at her. What you just said. About knowing what you did. She held his gaze steadily. I believe you. That's not a yes to anything. But I want you to know I believe you. Something moved through Caden Morrow's face that had no strategic name and required no management. Thank you, he said. The 3 weeks were the longest of Caden's life, which was saying something given the previous 2 years. He kept the promise. He did not reach out. He did not send intermediaries. He went to work and ran his pack and attended the council meeting in which the motion questioning his leadership was tabled pending the outcome of negotiations with Norah Voss, and he did not know if that framing made him feel hopeful or terrified or both. On the 22nd day, Elder Danny stopped by his office at 7 in the evening and placed a sealed envelope on his desk. She sent this to the council this morning, Danny said. I thought you should have it at the same time as us. She left without waiting. Caden looked at the envelope for a long time. Then he opened it. It was a letter. 4 pages, handwritten, in Norah's precise and unhurried hand. It was not a contract acceptance. It was something more complicated and more honest than that. She wrote about the 2 years. Not as accusation, as accounting. She described what she had built and what it had cost and what she had learned about herself in the process of building it. She described the ghost of the bond and how she had named it and what she had done with it. She described the mediation room, and what his 10 seconds of honesty had meant to her, and the fact that she had spent the following weeks arguing with herself about whether someone could fundamentally change the way he had changed, or whether this was simply a man in a crisis producing the words a woman needed to hear. She wrote that she had concluded, after 3 weeks of thinking, that she could not know the answer to that question before it happened. That certainty was not available to her, and that waiting for it was another way of letting fear make her smaller, which was something she had promised herself she would not do again. She wrote that she was accepting the co-leadership contract, subject to the specific amendments her attorney had proposed and which she had attached. She wrote that she was not accepting it for the bond, or for love, or for the ghost of what they had been. She was accepting it because the pact deserved the infrastructure she could build for it, because the work was genuinely important, and because she had realized that choosing herself did not have to mean choosing away from Ironvale. That those two things had only been incompatible because Caden had made them incompatible, and he was no longer doing that. On the final page, she had written one more paragraph, set apart from the rest. She wrote, "The bond is still there. I want you to know that, because you should have accurate information. I am not returning to Ironvale as your mate. I am returning as your equal, with my own title and my own authority and my own office that is mine from the first day. What happens with the bond, if anything, will be something that takes place between two people who have been honest with each other, slowly, and on no one's timeline. If you can do that, if you can be patient with something that has no strategic plan and no resolution framework, then I am willing to find out what it is." She wrote, "But I will never again be in a room where I am called replaceable. Not by you, not by anyone. If you understand that, truly, to the bone, then I'll see you next Monday." Caden read the letter twice. Then he sat in the silence of his office, in the stone house on the Montana Ridge, and he did something he had not done in 2 years. He let himself feel it, all of it, without managing it or converting it into action. The relief, the gratitude, the specific and unglamorous grief of 2 wasted years, the terrifying, clarifying weight of being given a second chance by someone who understood exactly what they were giving. He did not move for a long time. Then he picked up his phone and called Garrett. "She's coming back," he said. "I know," Garrett said. "Danny told me. Are you okay?" "No," Caden said. "I'm going to be." He put the phone down. He looked out at the Montana night, at the stars that had been there all along, and did not care about alliances or crowns or the specific ways powerful men manage their fear. He thought about what she had written. The patience. The slowness. The thing with no resolution framework. He thought, "I can do that. I will do that." He thought, "She walked out of this house with nothing and built something that the entire supernatural world is paying attention to, and she is choosing, with full information, with no illusions, with the hard-won wisdom of a woman who has spent 2 years learning exactly what she is worth, to walk back in. Not for him. For herself. On her terms. As his equal." And he thought, with a clarity that had been a long time coming, that is the only way any of this should ever have been. Or perhaps, the beginning. Did Norah make the right call going back? Was 3 weeks enough to trust a man who called you replaceable? And would you have accepted that contract, or held out for something more? Drop your answer in the comments below. I want to know where you stand. If this story hit you somewhere real, smash that like button and subscribe for more. The next story drops in 2 weeks and it is even more ruthless than this one. Turn on notifications. You do not want to miss it.